Welcome to the second segment of our pillar dealing with people, our fifth pillar of the Driving Business Growth Program. Now in this segment, we're going to discuss several of key people functions, and they include selection, utilization, the development of your team, measurements and rewards, and of course retention. Now I should say, with respect to retention, if you do selection, utilization, development, and measurement and rewards properly, it takes care of retention because you're giving your employees, your team members, a reason to want to work with your organization. Let's talk about selection first. Selection, bringing people into your organization. It's a critically important function because at that point, you're making a decision to spend money in terms of salary, benefits, maybe mistakes the new employee might make when they join you. But most definitely, you are spending money, so you want to be absolutely certain in who you select to join your company. In many cases, I have clients who the first time they look at an applicant's resume is 30 seconds before they sit down with the applicant or right when they do sit down. There's no way you can prepare, so preparation is critically important in selection. What is the position you're attempting to fill? What are the requirements of that position? What is the skill set that an applicant needs to have in order to successfully perform in that position? What are the questions you're going to ask them? How will you evaluate those questions? Will you give them an assessment tool to determine whether or not they'll fit into your organization and perform the job? These are all practices that you have to develop and determine before you begin to talk to applicants. Selection is critically important. As I said in the first video, you hire slow. Don't feel obligated to hire a person who's breathing into your organization because you've waited too long to fill the job, and now you're behind the eight ball, and you've just got to get somebody in there. And half a loaf is better than none. Well, the other half of that loaf may destroy your business in terms of mistakes and customer service. So you want to spend the time. If it requires 1 or 2 or 3 interviews, then invest the time. Selection is just that important. So let's assume you've done it correctly. You've hired a person, and they're now going to start. And we need to get into now the whole concept of utilization. Now, I know it doesn't sound nice to say we want to use our people, but the fact is that's what we're doing. We're using them in their functions to perform a certain task to create opportunities for growth in the business with customers that we currently have and customers that we're eventually going to have. So utilization is important. Every employee who comes into your organization, the first several days should involve onboarding. From as simple things as where the restroom might be, to where their parking spot is, if you have that, to where the cafeteria may be, all the procedural things of lunchtime, breaks, whatever the case may be. But in addition, you want to develop for every single employee a personalized developmental plan, a training plan based on their function. You want every employee not only to have their job description, you want them to understand the essence of their role. Now, what does that mean? The essence of their role should explain to the employee, A, why the job exists, B, what are the key functions within that job, C, is what is the contribution that job makes to the total scope of operations, D, what is the value that that job produces when done properly for the customer as well as internally, and E, number 5, why is that job important to all of our relationships with our customers? That's the essence of a job. If an individual understands that, they really don't need a job description. But for our discussion now, let's do both. Make sure they have the essence statement for their position as well as an up-to-date job description. Now what you want to do is you want to help that person and set up 30, 60, and 90-day training, 90-day performance goals, where at the end of 30 days, you expect them to know this. At the end of 60 days, you expect them to be able to perform these functions. And at the end of 90 days, they should be fully trained in everything they're doing. And they should be able to perform function A through Z without any difficulty in an efficient, timely manner. That then leads into development. Some of you may call it training. I hate the word training. We train our pets to go outside. We don't train our employees. We develop our employees. It is a subtle but very important difference. Training to me indicates a one-time event. We're going to send you to that training class, or we're going to train you on how to fill out this form. Whereas development has a much longer term connotation and meaning that it's an ongoing process. We're always developing, we're always growing, we always are getting better, at least we should be. So I have a little simple tool that I use. I use a three-legged stool to outline the importance of development. And let me walk you through it. The top of the stool is labeled the desired behavior. This is how we want the individual to perform. And there are three legs to that stool. Leg number one is the opportunity to learn a new skill. Now, many companies do a good job of that in exposing people, teaching people skills. The second leg of that stool involves the opportunity to use the new skill. And here's where sometimes the system breaks down, because I might send Mike to a training program, Mike comes back, or to a class, Mike comes back, but I say to Mike, Mike, you know, while you were gone those 3 days, everything got backed up. Forget about using the things you've learned, just get all this other stuff done. And that crisis gets taken care of. Then the next crisis comes up. And poor Mike never had a chance to use the new skill. And the only thing that's occurred, your organization has spent money to send Mike to that class, and you're not getting a return for that investment. Now, the third leg of the stool, which in my mind is the most important, and which many companies do a lousy job at, is the opportunity to give the individual constructive feedback on how well they've applied the skill that they learned. So in recap, top of the stool, desired behavior. First leg, opportunity to learn a new skill. Second leg, opportunity to apply that new skill. And the third leg, the opportunity to get constructive feedback on how well they're doing. Why wouldn't you give that individual feedback? People want to know where they stand. They want to know how they're doing. That feedback is critically important to maximize that individual's utilization and contribution to your company's purpose. So when we think about development, forget the word training. Think about the word development, as I said, and my three-legged stool is critically important, is a great visualization for that. Now next, we've talked about selection, we've talked about utilization, and we've talked about development, measurements and rewards. If I were king, I would throw away all performance appraisal programs. First, many of you don't like to do it because you might have to talk about not so good things. And shame on you for putting yourself in that position. You know, performance appraisal has become that once-a-year event where you've got to talk to a person about their shortcomings maybe, things they did well, and maybe you'll try to link the shortcomings and what they did well to a raise that you know they're not going to like. So I question the value of a traditional performance appraisal program. Some of you out there are probably shaking your head and disagreeing. Hear me out. I would rather suggest that on a quarterly basis, you meet with your individual employees and discuss how well they're doing during that quarter, recapping what went well, what they could have done better, recapping any significant achievements. Again, as I said earlier, folks want to know where they stand. They want to know where they're doing. And if you have a 30 to 45-minute conversation once a quarter, which every one of your employees, and I don't believe that is too much of a burden to your time, because if you can't invest time in developing your people, what else are you going to do? But if you can have those quarterly, what I call employee development meetings, when it comes time to the annual discussion or recap, you've minimized or mitigated all of the surprises. Because now everybody knows over the span of those 12 months where they stand. Now look, they still may not like their raise or their recognition, but you need to be able to explain how you tied that back to the essence of their role, the value that they provide, the contribution they make. One of the things I learned in my career in the corporate world, especially when I was in personnel, was that all of us are the best judge of our value, and all of us are the worst judge of our value. So what you want to be able to do when you talk about performance appraisal and compensation is to be able to explain to the individual employee, here's the value you were expected to produce, here's how that relates to your compensation, because you only have a fixed amount of dollars. And don't think by giving everybody the same increase that that's going to work. You should have a wide range of how salary dollars are allocated based upon performance and contribution. That is so critical to reward the key people, the people that you know you must retain. I find it very interesting sometimes where some business owners, managers, they'll deliberately give somebody a lousy raise hoping they'll quit because they're a subpar performer. And I try to explain to them, well, why would they quit? They know they're a subpar performer, but you're still rewarding them. You've got to be able to tie compensation to performance. And if you take my advice and follow the quarterly discussions, it gets a lot simpler and more effective to be able to talk to a person about their shortcomings while you're experiencing them, and to give them an opportunity over the subsequent quarters to improve and demonstrate that they should be retained. So let's now finish up with a discussion of retention. If your employees, your team members, you've selected the right ones, they understand the essence of their role, they understand that you believe that development is a critical part of their affiliation with your company, again through my three-legged stool, and that you've done a good job of evaluating them, providing opportunities to grow, why would a good person want to leave your organization? Remember what I said? Let's go back to the discussion of the essence. People need to know how they contribute, why their jobs exist, and let's go back to something we talked about in one of the earlier segments, the importance of making sure every one of your team members knows what they need to do, when to do it, how to do it, why they do it, who they do it for, and where it all fits in. Most people, the majority of people, their number one reason for wanting to work someplace is for that personal satisfaction, the opportunity to know that they're contributing. Next is they want to know that they're valued, not necessarily by the raise they get, but their feedback, their input, their performance, their participation is valued. How well do you solicit feedback from your team members? If you can master those two pieces, how they contribute, do they feel valued? Do they feel that they're creating something of value, that they get personal satisfaction? Then you have gone a long way, if you will, a long way in establishing an environment where retention is the norm. I have some clients who've said to me, Chris, I've got to control turnover. You can't control turnover. People leave organizations all the time to relocate, maybe a death, maybe an illness. They leave for reasons you cannot control. But you can control the environment in which they work, how they're managed, how they're led, so that you create a culture of retention, that you create a culture that encourages people to take reasonable risks, make mistakes, and learn from them, that you provide a culture where development is an integral part of how your business is structured. If you do those things, retention becomes a natural outgrowth. So what I want you to do now, is to go back and look at, just for now, selection. How do you bring people into the organization? I want you to make a list, ask your HR person or one of your key managers, make a list of all the steps that we currently follow in selecting someone. Many of us do what I call rearview mirror interviewing. We like to interview people and ask them questions about what they did in a prior job, which is dramatically different than what they might be doing for your company. So in addition to asking rearview mirror questions, you want to be asking questions that go from the windshield out front to understand, do they have the skills to do the job you want? If you haven't got good job descriptions, then there's no way you can come up with that. So make a list of all of the steps you take now, and then make a list of the steps you think you should take to find the job, create the essence of the position, develop good questions, determine who will interview this person and what questions they will ask, determine how you will assess their skills. Will you use a tool, an assessment tool? And there are lots of them out there. And I use a particularly good one. If you want to know what I use, drop me an email and I'll send you the information. Determine how you're going to evaluate the questions or the answers that the applicant gives you to the questions you ask. And that's how you should make the basis of your decision as to who you bring on board into your company. Do your due diligence. So that's your assignment from this segment. If you have any questions on it, you know where to find me. But for now, work your people, work with your people, give your people feedback, provide them the opportunity to want to stay with you and help you to grow your business.